suspects are being. One case involves the FBI is now offering $100,000 to see if the police are releasing.
Welcome to Misty Mysteries, a paranormal and true crime podcast. This week, I'm going to tell you about a painting by a man named Henry Fusel called The Nightmare, made in 1791. The painting is of a woman sleeping with a demon on her chest and a black horse behind them. This painting is thought to represent sleep paralysis and the feeling of pressure on your chest you get while experiencing sleep paralysis. This week on Misty Mysteries, I'm going to tell you about a sanatorium that may be closed, but the patients definitely haven't left. Have you heard of Anchor? Anchor is the easiest way to make a podcast. When I started Misty Mysteries, I didn't know where to go, and Anchor helped me get Misty Mysteries started without charging me an arm and a leg. Anchor is really my suggestion for anyone looking to start a podcast. It has tools that allow you to record and edit in-app or on the website. Anchor distributes your podcast on all the listening places such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Good Pods, and all your favorite listening places. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place, and best of all, it's totally free, all on Anchor FM and on the Anchor app. In 1883, a man named Major Thomas H. Hayes bought a plot of land not too far from his home he shared with his wife and kids in Louisville, Kentucky. He noticed no schools in the area and bought the land to put a single schoolhouse on, which he named Waverly School after hiring a teacher named Lizzie Lee Harris. Lizzie was a big fan of the Waverly novels by Walter Scott and asked Thomas to name the school after the novels. Thomas liked the name so much that he named the whole plot of land Waverly Hills. The Waverly School remained on Waverly Hills till 1908, when the Hospital Board of Tuberculosis bought the land from Thomas to build a hospital for the tuberculosis epidemic called White Plague, hitting the population of Louisville, Kentucky. The board picked the Waverly Hill property for its huge plot of land. It was believed at the time that fresh air and sun helped patients with tuberculosis get better, which is why a large land with lots of trees would be good for them. The sanatorium that was built was a 2-story wood building that fit 40 to 50 patients, and it opened in 1911 under the name Waverly Hill Sanatorium. The word Waverly in the name was changed from the spelling Waverley to Waverly. They dropped the E. With tuberculosis spreading to more of the population, the building wasn't able to hold 140 patients it needed to. In 1912, additional funding was added to make the building fit more patients. On August 31st, 1912, remodeling started and all patients were moved outside in tents. In December 1912, they reopened, being able to house 40 more patients, but that still wasn't enough, opening up a child's pavilion in 1914, adding 50 beds, making the sanatorium able to hold 130 patients. The children's pavilion was not only made to house sick children, but children of sick adults being treated at Waverly Hill Sanatorium. Because the sanatorium was so secluded, once you were there, you lived there. Unfortunately, as tuberculosis spread, even the building with the ability to hold 130 patients wasn't enough. October 17, 1926, a 5-story building was opened, increasing the capability from 130 to 400. Even with the new buildings, this didn't mean the patients were receiving the care they needed. Without medicine for the disease, experiments were conducted on the patients. A popular way doctors tried to cure tuberculosis was with fresh air, sunlight, and rest, even in winter, leaving patients in snow and summer heats. In some cases, to make the organ rest, lungs were partially removed or punctured. Of tuberculosis for the mind, they used electric shock therapy. With the mix of the experimental treatments and the disease itself, the sanatorium experienced death every day and needed a way to move deceased patients out of the building. This is when the employees at the sanatorium started using a tunnel to discreetly bring the deceased patients out, called the body chute, that saw 8,000 bodies pass through before the Waverly Hill Sanatorium shut down in 1962 due to a vaccine that slowed the spread of the disease and antibiotics helping patients get better. Just a year later, in 1963, it reopened as Woodhaven Geriatric Center, a live-in nursing center for elderly patients that suffer from dementia and mobility issues. The live-in nursing center closed in 1982 after abuse and neglect was uncovered in the facility. All patients in the nursing home were sent to a new live-in nursing center, but many patients stayed behind after death at the Waverly Hill Sanatorium. The sounds of past patients running around can be heard throughout the halls, along with doors slamming and weird unexplained noises in the body chute. The kitchen, that is now in shambles, seemed to keep the attention of some spirits. The Louisville Ghost Hunting Society, during one of their visits to the sanatorium, heard footsteps in the abandoned cafeteria and saw the door swing open when they smelled fresh bread being baked. No one was in the building except the investigation team, let alone kitchen staff, to be baking bread or even an active kitchen. A little boy named Timmy can be found in the halls in the room of the sanatorium on the 3rd floor. Timmy was 6 to 7 years old when he passed away in the sanatorium, and he wanders around playing in the building. His favorite way to play is with a ball. Those who visit the building will bring a ball to play with Timmy and will see the ball moving on its own, sometimes moving around the whole 3rd floor onto the 4th floor when no one is around. An entity named the Creeper may also join Timmy while guests are visiting the sanatorium. The Creeper brings a feeling of doom. It is a dark figure that climbs on the walls towards people. A group of boys who explored the old sanatorium seem to encounter what they call the Creeper. After fully exploring the building, the boys got to the roof to decompress before leaving, but the roof is when they saw a dark figure moving around. The boys started to get scared, one so afraid he wanted to jump off the 5-story building. But they went back inside, where the dark figure started to chase them. While running out of the old sanatorium, they heard doors slamming shut behind them, along with seeing footsteps and puddles of water on the floor. The group of boys barely held it together from the encounter, but were so relieved to get into their car and leave the property. Although the Creeper may seem the darkest and most powerful spirit in the building, you can also find spirits of women who have been stuck in the building along with the Creeper and Timmy. Mary Lee, who people have seen peeking around corners, walking around, and making pregnant women feel uncomfortable. It's believed Mary was a nurse who completed suicide in 1928 in the room 502 on the 5th floor after becoming pregnant with a doctor's baby unwed and contracting tuberculosis. The story says she hung herself on a light fixture in the room. Another nurse in 1932 is believed to have jumped out the window in the same room and passed away on the ground below the window. People get feelings of wanting to jump in the room and believe it's the spirit of this nurse. Both of these women's deaths have never been found on record, but could these be deaths that were never recorded or hidden, or a case where stories create the energy and the haunting? If you find yourself wanting to visit the Waverly Hill Sanatorium, you can visit for just $25 on a historical tour. If you are someone who enjoys investigating, the current owner of the building offers both group and private investigations. The old sanatorium can also be visited in October and Christmas time for special Halloween and Christmas events. But be careful, as you visit, you may run into a doppelganger of yourself or the people you're on a tour with. Thank you for listening to Misty Mysteries. If you like the podcast, please share with friends, family, and on social media. Speaking of social media, you can find the podcast on places like Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Please leave a good review for the podcast on places like Apple Podcasts and Podchasers. This week, if you leave a good review, let me know and you can receive a shout out on Wednesday's episode. If you would like to support the podcast even further, you can help by visiting Buy Me a Coffee, where you can do a one-time donation for a shout out on the podcast. Or with a membership, you can receive an exclusive Ghost Encounter episode with a choice of a topic for a future episode. You can find the podcast on places like Spotify, Anchor, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, now on Stitcher, and so many more. As always, my sources can be found in the episode description, and I'll see you on Wednesday.